Hey folks, this is Mavadat. Today I'm going to be talking about the ways in which religious people defend their beliefs when they're defending those beliefs poorly. And I have found, since I left my religion of birth about 2 years ago, through the conversations that I've had with my friends who are religious, that there are basically three categories into which the religious people's defense of religion falls into. And I think it's important for us as atheists, agnostics, non-religious people to be familiar with the ways in which religious people defend their beliefs, because it's important to be prepared so that we know what to expect when religious people are using techniques that are less than honest, or for some psychological reasons they're using them. And I also think that being aware of these categories of defense will help us control our anger when we encounter them, because they are enraging, and so that we'll appreciate our conversations with religious people who don't use these methods. Now, I want to say at the outset that when I speak about the reasons why believers use these methods, I don't mean that these are the conscious reasons why religious people use them. I believe that the techniques that I'm going to talk about are used by religious people in an unconscious way. And I'm going to try to explain how it is that they unconsciously adopted these methods. Now, what are the three categories that I'm going to talk about? They are obviating. They're the three O's of religious defense: obviating, obfuscating, and obstinating. I know obstinate is an adjective, not a verb, but I'm going to use it as if it was a verb. I hope that's okay. So what do I mean by obviate, obfuscate, and obstinate? Well, here is what I mean. In the case of obviating, the meaning of obviate is to make the discussion unnecessary, to make something unnecessary. And the point of this technique, this category of defense, is to avoid the whole discussion at hand in the first place. So you want to talk about the evidence for Christianity or something, and this way of defending the belief is to make that discussion unnecessary. What are the ways in which people do this? Well, there are several. One of which is by presenting everything as if it was a wash. The argument as if it was a wash. For example, you often hear theists say things like, atheism requires faith like theism. They both require faith, so it's a wash. It's 6 one way, half a dozen another. Take what you will, it's all the same. Another one, atheism leads to genocide and killing just like theism does. So why are you criticizing the theocracies? They're not especially prone to genocide. Atheism does the same thing. You see this sort of argument all over the place. This is obviating the discussion, making the discussion unnecessary, because atheism is just as bad as theism. It's arbitrary. That's the point. That's the underlying point of that argument. Another example of ways in which religious people try to obviate the discussion is by appealing to authorities. For example, they'll say things like, 99% of people throughout the history of the world, have believed in God, so how can we possibly be wrong? That is an appeal to popular belief, which is a kind of authority. Another one is God settles it. God said it, that settles it. It's another appeal to authority, which is meant to obviate the discussion, make it unnecessary. And the last two examples are perhaps the most ominous and ubiquitous, I should say. The first one is by crying foul, by saying that what you're saying is offensive to me, so don't tell me what you're saying. We hear this sort of thing all the time, especially from the Middle East nowadays, with criticisms of Islam becoming more popular as they are. And the last of the obviating examples is Pascal's wager, or whatever is like Pascal's wager, which is to say, theism offers great rewards if it's true, so you may as well believe it even if it's false. This sort of defense is meant to make the whole discussion of whether theism is true completely unnecessary. It's not a defense of theism. It's a way of avoiding having to give an offense of theism. And the point of obviating, why would a believer obviate, is the reason is to maintain the status quo. That is the way that society is right now, which is already, as it is, friendly to theism. For example, you don't see people in the minority or victims of injustice obviating discussions. Like you wouldn't see a black activist or a feminist in a conversation with someone trying to render the conversation unnecessary. No, because they are interested in change, which obviating opposes. Okay, the second method is obfuscating, and we're all familiar with this. We've all encountered it at one time or another if we've engaged in discussions with religious people. And what it is to make the discussion unclear so as to keep from having to defend a definite belief. So the believer basically avoids having their beliefs pinned down so they don't have to defend them. How do they do this? By speaking in ambiguities. For example, they'll talk about how God's essence is mysterious, God is love, Jesus is light, all these sorts of things that on the face of them are meaningless because they don't actually imply anything definite. And so they can say these things without any fear of repercussions, intellectual repercussions. The second way in which believers obfuscate is by speaking in apparent contradictions. This might seem strange because we generally think of contradictions as things that destroy a belief system. But in fact, history has shown that contradictions tend to preserve belief systems. For example, believers will say that God is all-powerful and good, but won't prevent unnecessary evils. This is a famous contradiction that has been given the name the problem of evil. The reason why contradictions actually preserve beliefs is because it immunizes them. It immunizes ideas from criticism, since they can't be pinned down to any one specific idea, because they're saying both things at the same time, both sides of the argument. And the last way in which believers will obfuscate is by being long-winded, by just basically being wordy, so that you this is a kind of way of obviating the discussion also, because you just basically get tired of the conversation and they feel they've triumphed because, hey, you're not, responding to them anymore, so you must be defeated. Now, I want to clarify that I think that ambiguity is fine and sometimes unavoidable, but that it should be tried to be pared down to some sort of definite belief. I think that we all encounter ambiguities every now and then, but we should try to be clear when we can. And the point of obfuscating is to keep one from having to change one's beliefs. That's the reason why people obfuscate. Although, again, it's not necessarily conscious, but that's the underlying subconscious reason. I've attached a link to Orwell on the English language, and I think that's a useful essay on why ambiguities are. And the last one is to obstinate, which is to adhere stubbornly to one's opinion. And I'm running out of time, and the idea basically is that the person sees the argument but refuses it to allow it to change their mind. The essence of this part is faith, that they just employ faith, and then they also change the subject when they